In the transgenerational transmission, intergenerational or heritaged trauma, you don't see that traumatic event. People who have symptoms from transmitted trauma, they don't make the link. We tend not to be aware of what we don't feel it belongs to us. Trauma survivors, they are like wanting to be someone else. What polyvagal theory teaches us, it's not about being someone else, but yourself. It's the way back to our human nature.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
I'm here in Potsdam at the Polyvagal Conference 2024, and I'm really pleased to have a newcomer in our community, Verena König. Welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. It's a great honor to have the opportunity. Thanks.
So you've talked to this conference, you talked about transgenerational trauma, but you told me you were doing much more things around trauma, and that maybe you can tell us a little bit, because people don't know you.
Yes, yes.
Around the world, and in France in particularly.
Yeah, I have a private practice since 20 years, or for 20 years, and I specialized on complex PTSD and early developmental trauma, childhood trauma, and I work a lot with family systemic therapy and with ego state therapy, that's a parts work, and with körper-oriented, body-oriented trauma processing approaches. And on the other hand, I teach a lot. I have an online community, and we teach people in trauma-sensitive coaching approaches, because it's a big aim for me. It's like a vision that polyvagal theory, trauma-informed theories and practices are implemented into every possible part of our daily lives and every profession. That's what I do.
And so polyvagal, because there's polyvagal, two sides, polyvagal theory and trauma, which is really where with Quantum Way we want to what we want to empathize and bring this new understanding of maybe human being, if I can say that like that. What did polyvagal theory bring to your practice and your understanding of maybe complex trauma and human being at large?
Yeah, it's a nice question, because it emphasizes that there is no separation between looking at a traumatized person with a polyvagal lens or looking at a human. And yeah, so polyvagal theory brought to me in my work with complex traumatized individuals, on one hand, more possibilities to explain things. I like to psychoeducate my clients, which I think is really crucial for the healing process and for self-empowerment. So there were good theoretical explanations for symptoms, for behavior, for all that we meet when we are traumatized. And there were also, on the other hand, very nice practical applications, so to speak, which are mostly given by Deb Dana, like very inspirational things, how you can guide people to explore their nervous system and their symptoms too, and find another way of acting in a self-compassionate way. So it was not, I didn't feel it was like a new thing. It was a logical widening of what I already was working with. It was like, yes, now there are the words, and yes, now there are ways to inspire and teach people even more clearly. And that made a big change, made a big difference.
That's what many therapists or have said about polyvagal theory. Like it was like the missing part, but something that is so obvious,
Yeah,
and that really brings a lot of shame and guilt out of the system, because we are all wired the same. We all have the same nervous system, and that's really important to know that.
Yes, yeah, and it's very helpful in trauma work, because in trauma work it's so much about changing the perspective. Affected trauma survivors, they face so many blockings in their way of life. They are like wanting to be someone else, wanting to act like someone else. And what polyvagal theory as other points of view teach us, it's not about being someone else, but yourself. And trauma just disrupts the connection to our so-called maybe true self or our uninjured self. And this point of view, or this change in self-perception or in the perception of another one, is so game-changing, and it's so much opening. It's opening up in the mind, in the body, in the connection with someone else, to just realize that you are on the right track already, because you survived, and now you can walk the way in another way, with another attitude.
I want to jump on this word survivor, because it's really a word we use in English. I don't know in German, but in French it's kind of difficult to say survivor.
Yeah,
we tend to still to use victims, but it's interesting to go toward this survivor. Survivor of trauma. How is it in German? Do you use the same, or?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I observe that this is a shift in public language in the trauma scene for sure, that there is a change from victim to survivor, because it's so much about empowerment, and many affected people don't want to be called a victim, because there is a gap in the status of power. Maybe this is a good way to say it. If I call myself a trauma victim, I'm still in the victim state, and the survivor state is more resource-oriented. It's more towards life. It's more away from the perpetrator, and victimhood is always perceived as linked to the perpetrator. And so many people really appreciate this differentiation, because it gives them more space between what happened in the past and what is the status today. Yeah.
But what I often hear is that, I'm not a survivor. Like, there are some survivors of the Holocaust who are in Germany, and so it's something that is in Berlin, so it's something that is really here in our minds. How can I be a survivor of trauma, because I didn't go through such horrors?
Yes.
What would you say to those people?
That is so interesting to get your perspective. I think in Germany there is a big problem with victimhood, because we are the perpetrator people. And if I say I'm a trauma survivor, this is only my interpretation right now.
Interesting.
It is like an individual thing. And when I'm a victim, that's like, how can I be a victim when I'm in the perpetrator people realm, so to speak? Maybe that's a part of it too, that victimhood is not an accepted thing in Germany, or has not been for a long time. The soldiers and families, people, children, women, everyone who was traumatized in Germany did not have the allowance to be a trauma survivor or a victimized human being, because we were the perpetrator. Horror, spreading people. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe that could be a part of it.
You know, when you say that, I really feel like, whoosh, that hurts. That hurts that many people couldn't claim their survivor or their own trauma because they were not allowed to. And that's part of the, I think it might be special here, but we can find that in many different places. You're not allowed to be a trauma victim or a trauma survivor, because there are some people that suffer more than you. And that we hear that so many times in the trauma world, in the trauma work.
From our clients.
Yeah,
they
from
tell
our clients.
us. Yeah,
that's what they tell us. And the perspective you're giving, it's so important.
Yes, and it's like a downward comparison spiral. And it's also interesting, maybe this is kind of how do you say it? Like a defense mechanism to say, I'm not allowed to call myself a survivor or a victim because people are more suffering. This might help to diminish the pain I feel myself. When I can compare it to someone else who's even worse, I have to be better. I have to feel better. I have to not claim for anything. So maybe that helps also not to crack into the symptom or into the downward spiral.
But it also put the trauma a little further, and so it's harder to heal from the trauma.
Yeah, that's what all our defense mechanisms do. They prevent us mostly from healing. They don't help us heal, but they help us survive, and we stay in the survival mode.
You've talked in these days, in this conference, you talked about transgenerational trauma, intergenerational trauma, and I think it's something that people don't really talk about. They're not conscious that they can carry so many things from their parents, grandparents, and maybe many generations, previous generations. Why do you think we don't talk a lot about that?
I think there are many reasons. One, maybe first of all, could be that we have a quite strict trauma definition. And one key part of the trauma definition is a traumatic event. And in the transgenerational transmission, intergenerational or heritaged trauma, heritaged, I don't know if it's correct, you don't see that traumatic event. And so people don't fit the criteria for the diagnosis. And this is maybe one reason why transgenerational or generationally transmitted trauma is not seen.
Legacy trauma.
Legacy trauma is not seen, not really recognized. And the other thing is that we tend not to be aware of what we don't feel it belongs to us. So people who have symptoms from transmitted trauma, they don't make the link that it could be from someone else or with aspects of someone else. They have a symptom, they have symptoms, they have problems, they face difficulties, and they are looking for reasons for this special problem. And they get explanations. They get explanation, yeah, that's a depression. This is because of your biochemistry or whatever. This is an anxiety disorder. We have some medicine for that or some therapy for that. This is like an attachment issue. Maybe you should make a retreat and coaching or whatever. So there are fragmented points of view to fragmentations of the bigger picture, to the single symptoms. And this is not recognized as trauma. These are maybe two reasons that are, to me, quite obvious. And also, and that's one thing I mentioned in my talk, the heritage thing is always linked to unspoken aspects of trauma, to unspoken political themes mostly. And so there is not even an awareness to look at that part because it's for so long, it has not been integrated. Yeah.
So to go back to polyvagal theory and to wrap up our conversation together around trauma, we cannot go dive deep into those topics, but polyvagal theory, you say that it's important to do some psychoeducation, help people understand how their nervous system is working and that their reactions are not their fault and that it's normal that they react this way or this way. But I think it's, well, I would say it's more than just psychoeducation, that polyvagal theory really brings us in places that we haven't been or we didn't dare go in psychotherapy.
Yes. Yes, it's definitely more than psychoeducation. This is a very dry word for so much color and juiciness. I think this kind of psychoeducation leads us to another attitude, to another point of view, to another stance. It changes maybe everything for someone, as it's like, and this is oftenly repeated, I guess, it's the way back to our human nature. Yeah, so maybe this is a good wrap up.
Thank you very much, Verena, for this conversation. And if people want to know more about your work, they will find you. You have a website, you have a podcast.
Yes, I have a podcast
in German. In German, but well, there might be some German speakers here listening to us. And on your website, we can use Google Translate and it's easy.
That's really easy. Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Florence.
Thank you very much. That was great.